What do I do when a parent of mine is bad mouthing my partner or my spouse?
Welcome to the art and science of difficult conversations. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lucy, and we love having difficult conversations.
That's right. And each week we'll either share a tip, hear how others have gotten better at difficult conversations, or demonstrate common difficult conversations and what to do and what not to do.
Let's get into it.
Welcome back to the art and science of difficult conversations, where we believe if you communicate better, you can live better. I'm Chris, your host, and as always, I am joined with Lucy. Lucy, how are you today?
I'm good, Chris. Thank you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. We're recording on a Friday, so it's nice that
Yay.
it's the end of the week and we can relax. And if you notice, I'm in a different room of the house. Just wanted to try something new. No real reason. Just wanted to try something new. So we'll see how it looks. It's a little bit less. The lighting isn't as good as my previous place.
You have like a halo from the fan above your
I
head.
know. Yeah, I know. That's the weird thing. There's nothing I can do about it. So for those of you that are just listening, this is a really visual podcast today. You have to really see what's
So
happening.
you really need to check out our YouTube account. Actually have a new background too. I rearranged my office space here. I used to be on the other side.
Do you have a window in front of you? Is that how you're
On
set
the
up?
side. Before
Mm.
it was on my left side, now it's on the right side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where I usually record, where my office is, I'm in the basement, and there is a window, but it's
Oh
not near
no.
me. And I like having windows. I like being able to look outside. So it's
Me too.
really a little
Yes.
depressing to sit down there for a long time.
Unless you paint the window or make a nice, you get a nice poster of.
I guess so. Yeah.
That's not the same, no.
It's not the same. But either way, so today we have an interesting topic. We're going to do a personal type of difficult conversation. And I actually see this a lot on Reddit,
Hmm.
different variations of this type of conversation, and sometimes on Facebook as well. But essentially, what do I do when a parent of mine is bad mouthing my partner or my spouse? Let's say the spouse, right? Because you're married, it's a little bit more permanent rather than just a short-term partner. But even a long-term partner, what do you do when your parent is just bad mouthing your partner? So now you're just stuck between these two worlds. So you gotta set this boundary between you and your parents. And do you tell your partner or spouse what they're saying? Because they're probably
So
feeling
tricky.
it.
Yep.
I can only imagine they're feeling the dynamic. It's not going to be hidden unless your parents like
No.
a super good actor and good at hiding it. But Lucy, from what your vantage point, why do you think that's so hard to have that conversation with a parent?
Well, of course, because they are the people that we know the longest. They've been with us our whole life, even before we can remember. And so the dynamics can be really difficult to change. And I hear it from a lot of clients, no matter what age, I see that there is a time in the transition, the children and parents, when unless the children intentionally start transitioning, depending on the dynamics, of course, if the parents are already respectful and want the children to have their own boundaries. Sometimes that's not the case, a lot of times. And then the children need to kind of defend their independence and their own right for their own opinions, their own mistakes, their own life. And sometimes it happens in the 20s. Sometimes I have some clients, it happens in their 40s. Some
Mm-hmm.
clients, it happens, I still hear they're in their 50s and they still have a challenge with the parent.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an important, in a way, stage I look at it in our lives. Renegotiate the dynamics with our parents. It is possible, and it's very challenging
Mm-hmm.
because these are our dear, near, sometimes painful relationships. So they can be the hardest to change.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that dynamic that of the parent child, because I didn't think of it until I became a parent myself, but I'm always going to see my kids as these little kids, right? And like no matter how big they get, I'm still going to remember all these times that they were these little kids and they needed my help with stuff. And doing stuff. So you're right, that dynamic plays out even as you're an adult. And I think
Yeah.
my mom just recently moved in with me and my
Mm.
family, and for up until that now, she's still treated me like a teenager or a kid,
Mm.
but I've noticed that over the past, it's just been 2 weeks since she's been here, that she's seen me more in my element day to day, managing the household or different things and working. Now that she's seeing it more firsthand, like, oh, I'm doing stuff, I'm able to, I'm responsible, I'm able to do things. It's now changed it where she's not doing that as much. She's not necessarily, to your point, renegotiating. We don't have to say anything. She's just naturally seeing me do
Naturally
it. So she's
shifting.
realized. So she's shifting and realizing, oh, okay, Chris knows what he's doing, or Chris is able to
Mm.
manage things, so I don't have to necessarily do it the same way. So I
Mm.
think there's that element also of, if I don't see you all the time, all I
Makes
have to go
sense.
off is
My memories of you.
my memories of you, which
Mm-hmm.
are strong, right? Like,
Yep.
I raised these kids 24/7 for a
Yep.
long time, so I get it.
And
So
there's a
you're
sense of, go ahead.
so you're right. It's that renegotiating, um, and I think partially what also makes it hard is when if you're the person about to have that conversation with your parent. If you haven't thought about that, you don't realize it needs to be a renegotiation. You think you just need
No.
to give them this harsh feedback or tell them to stop doing something, and you're setting a boundary for sure. You need to do that, and you don't realize that it needs to be a negotiation of like a new relationship altogether. You just need them to change their behavior in some way, but
True.
it's the whole dynamic that needs to
Yeah,
change.
it's much deeper change can be. Especially if the way that it's been said before, it has not been working for a long time. Maybe we were just not wanting to have that conversation because
Mm-hmm.
maybe we wanted to get that attention, that love from parents, and maybe we are worried that if we set the boundary, they're gonna give us pushback or guilt trip us, which makes it even harder if that's been the dynamics of guilt tripping in some families that runs.
Yeah,
Family is
yeah.
everything. You cannot set the boundaries. You need to be there always for us. And if you start doing something for yourself, then that could be an issue. So that's one way of, because the
Mm,
the new spouse, of course, there's going to be less time available to spend with and help with parents, especially once we start having our own families and children.
mm-hmm.
And then it can get complicated with, the rules about being with the grandchildren.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, because you're bringing in that culture aspect, because different cultures have different
And that too.
expectations for how families will
Hmm.
interact.
Yep.
Yeah. So then, how would you approach this conversation? What are your tips and strategies to approach the conversation well?
Well, I like that you're starting with the positive. So, how to do it, what to do. I would say number one is preparation, what we always say. Really being clear about what we want to communicate. And not only about what we want to communicate, but also how we want to communicate, how we want to feel during the conversation, how we want the relationship to be, and actually even share that intention with that parent. I really care about you. I really want us to have a good relationship, and this is happening. Let's work on this together.
Hmm.
Rather than you are doing this. So
Yeah.
really approach that from both empathy for ourselves and also them, and being transparent about what we really want and what we can connect on. Both of us probably want to have a great relationship and be close together.
Mhm.
Things are changing. Let's see how we can continue moving forward to still have a good relationship. That would be one tip. What comes up for you? What would you add to that? Or does it resonate?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And it'd be hard for me to say I disagree with all of that because that's what we talk about on the show all the time. Is let's set that, be transparent, let's be open, let's talk openly, honestly about our relationship. I think it's important to really prepare ahead of time and think through what do you need to be calm and appropriate during this conversation? What do you need to stay even keeled? And then if it's your parent, you know them pretty well. What do they need to stay cool and calm? And
Mm.
what do you, maybe you do need somebody else in your family to be part of that relationship. You know, maybe you have an uncle or an aunt that is kind of on your side or see things your way, or
Mm.
maybe you have a sibling, maybe there's a cousin, maybe there's somebody in your family that's actually both of you listen to, both of you respect, or at least have a good
Mm.
relationship where you're able to listen, and they be a good mediator. Maybe they're
Mm.
actually a better situated to help facilitate that conversation. I know it's weird because you're like, do I bring another person into this dynamic that's already all over the place? I think with family, sometimes you might want to think about that. If, especially
Makes
if you have a close
sense.
family, if you're,
Mm.
if you have a family that's dispersed and you're not really that close, then
That
you don't
might
have
be
that person. Yeah.
true. Yeah. I like thinking out of the box, looking at who else could support me in making this happen. We don't have to do it ourselves. And probably what could get in a way could be part of the preparation. What does my parent usually say that's triggering me?
Yeah.
And preparing ourselves. Okay, so if this is possible, they will respond to me this way. How could I stay calm in this situation? What could I say instead of me reacting with anger or shutting down or saying I just need to go. Okay, let's talk some other time.
Hmm.
Whatever that
Hmm.
answer is. Or
Yeah.
just suppressing and just okay, fine, whatever you say, let's just talk about something else and closing the conversation.
Yeah. And to add nuance to that, I think being clear on what your coping skills are, like what do I need to
Mm,
stay calm? And
yeah.
also what are my non-negotiables? What, like, if it goes to this point, this level, I need to take a break. So if they say this or they do this, I'm just gonna ask to
Mm.
take a break. I'm just gonna say, hey, listen, I need to take a break. We gotta come back to this later.
You know what came to mind also when somebody is in that situation when they are not used to setting boundaries, especially with the
Mm,
parents, where they
yeah.
have those relationship dynamics where the parent guilt trips, and they want to be that good daughter, good son, and they are afraid that if they set the boundary and say no, that means they're not a good son or daughter. What would you say
Mm.
in this situation?
I think that's where you can start at the beginning, is doing that level setting at the beginning. And you can
Mm.
acknowledge that, hey, listen, I know we don't do this very often. I know we don't talk like this. And I want to talk about this topic. I want to talk about our relationship with my spouse. And I think it's important because I love both of you.
Mm.
And so I want to try something different. I think acknowledging that is really a powerful way of, because it's going to be different no matter what. Like, it
Yeah,
is a different way, especially to even have that conversation in the first place is different than how the dynamic has been so far. So it's okay to
absolutely.
acknowledge that and let and talk about it, because otherwise it's just gonna be this elephant in the room. Like, why
I
are you
love
talking like
that.
this? Why are you
Yeah,
randomly
this is
saying
weird.
this now?
Yeah. What's wrong with you? What did your spouse say again that you're
Yeah,
talking this way?
yeah, and I think to your point about the boundaries, it is new, and you have to also practice setting that boundary, like practice saying the words out loud, like, hey, I need a
Mm,
break, or hey, I don't want to talk about this
yes.
right now, can we take a break?
Yep.
And realize that if you go in and you know it's going to be contentious, you know that they're going to react poorly, you might have to take a break right away. And that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. That's not a failure. It's because it's a new
Mm,
thing. It's something both of you have never done before in this situation. So it's okay to say, hey, Lucy, I want to talk to you about how you're talking about my wife or my husband. And you
mm,
start saying, what do you mean? Why are we going to talk about this?
yeah.
Like, why are you being so sensitive? Why are you being such a fool about this? You know
Mm,
what, Mom? I need to take a break. Like, I want to make sure we talk about this. I don't want us to be yelling at each other, like we
yeah.
usually do. If it's okay with you, I'm gonna come back.
Mm. What I like what you did there was staying calm, being very clear. And And also, what I'm hearing is really being kind with ourselves rather than judging ourselves. Oh my God, I completely screwed it up. It's never gonna work. I'll just give up. knowing that it's a new process for both parties, for us as well as the parents. They also don't know how to have probably the conversation, because if they
Yeah.
did, we probably would have been having those conversations already. So it's
Yeah.
also for them a new skill to learn. How do we navigate these situations together in a calm,
Right.
peaceful way, where this conversation actually can bring us together rather than move us apart, and both of us would be left hurt and
Right.
feeling
Right.
resentful or upset.
And
Um,
and I want to be
mhm.
clear also, like if you're listening to this, you're hearing me and Lucy keep saying, or like when we give examples of how to say it, we keep saying we love you, we want to continue this relationship. And you're like, what if I don't want to continue a relationship? Well, then you wouldn't be having this conversation. You would just be like, I'm just not gonna stop talking. I'm just gonna stop talking to my parents.
True.
I'm over it. I don't need that stress in my life. And maybe that is, we're not gonna say that's the wrong approach, right? Only you
No,
know your dynamic with your
exactly.
family, and there's so many factors that go into that. There are going to be some relationships that you're like, it's not worth having this conversation, right? Whether it's
True.
there's a codependency or there's some kind
Mm-hmm.
of other dynamic that's going on that's making it, this might not be the good time to have the conversation. It might be better at this time to just not even have the conversation and just stop that contact. But
Yeah.
if you're listening to this and you're like, I want to have the conversation, we can only assume that you care about your parent in some way and you want there to be a better relationship.
Yeah. And it's a process in a way too, and only you know where is the boundary. And
Mm-hmm.
so that could be setting the firm boundary. If you've been setting that boundary repeatedly and they're still not responding, sometimes that's what's needed. You know what? Unless something happens, unless something change in our communication, I don't really want to communicate this way. So
Yeah.
let's just take some break from our conversation communication.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that
It sounds.
it may be harsh and hard,
Mhm.
especially if we depended on that relationship and we are used to being close, can be very painful. And at the same time, it could be also very painful and detrimental to our well-being, to our new family's well-being, if we don't resolve that and don't create that boundary.
Mhm. That's right.
And
Yeah.
that those are not easy choices to make, that's for sure.
Right. For those of you that think it's harsh, I urge you to, or not urge you, but I would just bring up the reality that sometimes in some families you do have to close contact off.
Yeah.
If there's a lot of times in substance abuse treatment within families, right?
Yeah.
There are some times when you do have to end, support for a family member, right? Because otherwise you're just getting into a codependent relationship and you're actually enabling certain behaviors rather than helping, right? Despite
Yeah.
best efforts. Um,
Absolutely. Or if there's been mental illness or other form of serious illness in the family,
yeah.
that can make it even more difficult. Again, can go into the codependency. And so it's also important to have that support system
Mhm.
for you in place, be it your new family members, your friends, having a therapist or coach to really support you through that.
Yeah. So then, Lucy, what would you say don't do? Don't do these things in this kind of conversation.
Um, well, again, probably the other opposite of don't scream at each other.
Yeah.
Even though in some cultures that maybe that's how we connect. I also heard that from some clients at the beginning.
Hmm.
But in general, that is not a productive way to have a conversation.
Hmm.
I would also say don't avoid having that conversation. Don't keep
Mm.
postponing that. And take a moment and reflect, what are the costs if I don't have that conversation? What is the
Mm.
cost and impact, a negative impact on my relationship with my spouse, on our new family, when I allow this to happen, allow the parent badmouth them, or really
Mm.
be maybe even angry at them, or who knows what else is happening, depending on the degree,
Yeah.
right? Am I willing to let that happen, tolerate that? Am I aware of the negative impact and how the
Hmm.
spouse feels about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
considering also the impact on them if I don't do anything. Because
Hmm.
it may be challenging. There is fear, of course. What else would you say what not to do?
I would actually add nuance to your one about yelling. And I think there's only I'm going to only say this in personal relationships because in the workplace there's a decorum that's specific to the workplace. In a family or a personal relationship, I think some families do communicate via yelling. And when I say yelling, I just mean raised voices. I think what we in this show always talk about is there's a difference between just talking in raised voices, kind of yelling in a little bit, like talking
Mm-hmm.
louder or talking more pointedly,
Yeah.
and yelling at the other person. So you always do this, or you're like this. So that's the kind of stuff that's not productive. And at the same time, there are families that like you just kind of yell loudly to speak over one another, not speak over one another, but just kind of be heard because
Yeah.
maybe your family has been in like there's lots of people in the family, so you're just used to yelling to get your point across here over all the chaos of like
Yep.
lots of people around. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Some people just talk loud. Some people
True.
just yell. They get very passionate as they're talking.
Yeah.
It's really the more what we talk about is don't yell at the other person or downplay the other person or you know, demean the other person. That's the stuff that's not productive. But in a personal relationship, I actually don't know if yelling is always necessarily a bad thing, as long as the yelling is just more about the volume of the voice,
Yes, makes
not
sense.
necessarily the content.
At the aggression, let's say, or
Yeah,
accusing and guilt tripping back, maybe.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that's the big, and yeah, everything else, I don't have much to add to, what not to do. Um, yeah, it's
Yeah.
really about what can you do to set boundaries and,
Mm,
you know,
yes. I mean, there could be what we haven't mentioned. Acknowledge, let's say, if the parent, seeing if we can also validate where they are coming from. Of course, if we feel safe, let's say, acknowledge their concerns.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so
that's
if
great.
we want to be heard, and we can do that for them too. Like listen first, acknowledge. Doesn't mean we agree with them, but we just validate that yes, I hear you. And at the same time, this is my experience. And let's talk about it how we can
Mhm.
find a way to communicate together in a way that works for both of us. Because the previous way is not working for me, and therefore it's not working for us.
Yeah.
There's I don't know if that's also cultural. It's just it came to my mind because I'm originally from Europe, Czech Republic. Now have been living in the US, and I started working with some European clients, Czech, Slovak, and in that culture, at least before, it's not as common to say "I love you" to family
Mm.
members so often
Yeah.
as is in America, even friends. I love you. Bye. See you next time. For that, it's like I'm dying. I really love you, and on
Mm.
our deathbeds. And so some clients, well, when we were talking about the difficult conversation, I cannot say it this way. This is like the American way. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
nah.
yeah.
This is like they would be like, "What's wrong with you? Are you dying? Something's wrong." And so if that's your culture, either if it's your cultural background from different country or even a culture just living in the US, wherever you are, also different families have different cultures. It could be again just acknowledging, you know what, we are not used to talking like this together. And at the same time, I am changing, I want to make a change. And these are my reasons for that. And
Mm.
make it
Hmm.
okay. Just acknowledge, yes, this is weird and it's okay.
Yeah.
That could take some pressure off.
It's similar to Chinese culture. We won't say I love you, right? It's more
It's
like
weird. Like, yeah.
it's really fruit, actually. It's if if we cut fruit for you, it's our way of showing like we
Oh
love you, we care
yeah.
about you.
Like feeding people,
Like
yeah.
feeding
Yeah.
people, buying you
Through
stuff, doing stuff
action.
for you. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
we wouldn't normally say I love you to each other. That's not as commonplace.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So so I think for people, this is what I always tell people when I'm coaching them or training them. I always say the specific words aren't as important most of the time. There's some things that are important, like saying the word but and saying and instead.
yep.
Those things are important. The reality, though, most of the time, it's really more the sentiment we're trying to get across. How are you going to convey this sentiment to this other person? So you don't have to say I love you or we love each other. It's really just how do you convey the sentiment that I care about you or we are
Ah,
together. You're my parent. You know, you're important to me. That's really the more important
exactly.
thing.
Yeah. Love it. So, should we go to the next stage
Of
and
taking
do
a
a
break,
little?
let's take a break. Yeah, let's take a break, and then when we come back, let's
Okay,
let's demonstrate it. Let's see what it looks like.
sounds good.
Hey, Chris here. I really appreciate you listening to this podcast. And if you are listening to this podcast because you're looking to get better at these difficult conversations, well, if you really want to de escalate difficult behaviors and you want to be assertive without being aggressive and being true to yourself, I have a self paced course that can really help you because I know it's difficult being assertive in lots of different situations. If you're at work and you have to give feedback, if you have to deliver bad news to an employee, or deliver bad news to somebody that you care about in your personal life, or you're struggling to deal with defensive or sensitive people who are pushing your buttons and you don't know how to push back. It doesn't have to be that way. There is a world where you can handle these tough emotions with confidence. You can speak honestly and kindly while you're still being assertive. And you have the ability to manage emotional outbursts and stubbornness calmly, because these are things that I've had to overcome and learn. And so this self-paced course goes through all of those things. I've created this trust framework that helps you think through how to prepare for and how to facilitate hard conversations. And you hear a lot of it actually in this podcast as I talk about how to handle difficult conversations in lots of different scenarios. Currently, the course is closed for enrollment. There's a waiting list. If you are interested in learning more, enrollment will open up at the end of August and the beginning of September. So please go to the website. I'll link it down below, and you can learn more about it and join the waiting list if you want to hear more about it. But I'd love to see you there.
Okay, welcome back. Let's spend some time practicing it. Let's spend some time demonstrating what it could look like to have this conversation. And so let's say Lucy's married
Mhm.
to a guy. I'm her dad, and I disagree with this guy's existence overall.
Ouch.
And I'm just gruff. So let's see how Lucy manages the conversation.
Let's see. This is going to be an interesting experience also for myself because unfortunately my dad passed away a long time ago now. So I
Hmm.
didn't get an opportunity to have the conversation with him, but let's see how we can do this.
Okay.
Okay. So do you want me to start? Do you want to start?
You came into my house. What are you doing
Okay.
here?
Hey, Dad, I'm just coming to visit. It's good to see you.
What's up? How you doing today?
Really good. The fires are finally decreasing. The air is better. I feel much, and it's Friday and the weekend.
Yeah.
So I
Did you eat
thought,
yet?
you know, it's kind of dinner time. Yeah, yeah, I could eat a little something.
Great.
Where's,
Let's go sit and eat. I got some food
oh,
here.
thank you, Dad. So nice of you. It's always so caring. Thank you. So as we were sitting here and eating, Dad, I don't know if this is a good time to talk about one thing. I care about you. I appreciate you. I see you care about me. I see that, you always offer me food. And I see
What
that
do you need?
as
Why are you saying this? What do you
exactly.
need?
See how caring you are. So here's the thing. Um, I want to appreciate you that you haven't said anything about my husband yet today.
Mark? What about him?
Yes. Well, in the past who always found something negative about him. And I really love him and care about him, and he is a great support. You are still a great support in my life, and
Look,
nobody
that
will ever
guy,
replace you.
I'm not
Eh.
worried about you replacing me. You think that's what I'm worried about? That guy is just a loser.
That's
He
it.
he just doesn't have his head on straight. He's just not going anywhere. So I don't
Hmm.
know, you wanted to marry him. I'm not gonna stop.
You
I'm not gonna
did, yeah.
physically stop you from marrying, but
Well, thank you, Dad.
he's yeah, you're not my property, but he's just a like you chose terribly. And you're gonna, one day, you want to have a
Hmm.
family, you want to have kids, and he's not going to be a good dad. He's not going to be able to provide for
Hmm.
you long term. Like, I don't know. Like it's fine if that you married him. Like, I'm not going to stop you, but it's just going to cause a lot of suffering for you later on.
You know,
I
Dad,
just don't want you to suffer.
thank you, Dad. I hear you. And I see that you want the best for me. You do. I'm hearing that you say you don't want me to suffer. And I hear you. And thank you for your care. And at the same time, I'm really happy with Mark. And I feel safe with him. I he does his best to provide for me
Does
and for
being
the
happy pay
family.
the bills?
It's the basic. It's if
Does
I
that
was
pay your
be
rent?
it's 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 important that for me, um my relationship with Mark, I'm adult now. I am responsible for my life, for making choices. And in our relationship with you, I would
But you
love
are
your
still my
support.
daughter.
I
You
know, and
even
I
if you
will
are, do you know that
be.
even if you are 50 or 60, you are still my daughter?
I will always be your daughter. And at the same time, now I'm also an adult. And I would like us to still have a good relationship. And whenever you say that, the impact on me is I feel really sad. And I don't want to feel sad when talking with you. And that impact, if we continue having those conversations, then I would be coming here less and less because I would just wouldn't feel good coming here because, oh my God, my dad is going to be talking about Mark again instead of us talking about something else.
It
So, how
sounds like you're
about
threatening me.
I see that could be that, seen as that. And at the same time, no, this is just, I'm telling you how this is for me, how I'm sharing, how is that experience for me. It's just hurtful. And here is what I'm proposing. When I come here, I really want to just enjoy my time with you. And let's have a conversation about you, about your hobbies. I can share about what's new for me. And I would love really us to enjoy our time together. What do you say? Or we do an
Ah,
outing. We do
you
the
are.
walk that both
Mm,
of us love with the family dog and
mm,
just enjoy our time together. How about that? And then
ugh.
that I would love.
Look,
If I have a challenge, I would come to you and then I would love to hear your opinion. But
ugh.
unless I
Look,
ask about Mark, I would love us to put that topic on the side for now.
listen. I'll listen. I won't say anything. Okay, listen. I won't say
Thank
anything.
you.
But you're gonna see, like in a few years, it's just gonna get harder and harder. But I won't. Fine. If you don't want me to say
Thank
anything, I
you.
won't say anything.
Thank you, Dad. I really appreciate you. This food is delicious. Mom, thank you for cooking it.
Okay, we can cut there. I kept throwing it at you. How did it
You
feel,
did, yeah.
Lucy?
um, well, I was really leaning into looking at that as a way of you showing care and love
Mhm,
rather than trying to get into. Luckily, I didn't get triggered.
mhm.
I feel, I think, I hope. And so translating that even when you started talking about Mark badly and he's a loser, I think that was triggering.
Mhm.
Um, that would be triggering for anybody, I would say. Really
If
having
you
that
care about your
perspective.
spouse.
Exactly. Yes. Um, that would be, I had to make this shift. Okay, what is that? Why is my dad saying that? He really cares. Yes, he doesn't agree with my choice with about Mark, but I don't want to talk about Mark. And
Mhm.
this was my point. How was that experience for you on
You know what I noticed was
that?
interesting about your approach is in these kind of conversations, we typically try to frame the conversation as how do you ask more questions? How do you
Mm,
engage more? And I
yeah,
noticed that in this one, you were like,
nope.
I'm not gonna let Chris talk at all. I need to like guide the conversation like minute by minute. I need to say everything and lead him to the answer. Um,
Hmm,
and I don't think that's a wrong
that's a
approach,
good
especially if it's
observation. Yeah. Uh-huh.
and I don't think it's the wrong approach necessarily, right? Because this is a very contentious conversation already. Like we're already in
Mm-hmm.
different places.
Yes.
And so, and your goal was, I just need you to stop saying these things to Mark.
Yes.
Um,
Exactly.
in front of me, essentially, like I don't think you said stop thinking that way about him. Just, I need you to stop saying this in front of me.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's the boundary. I think that's you were effective in getting that boundary across and saying, I need you to stop doing this. Um, is that a threat? Yes, it is a threat. Like if you keep saying this, I'm gonna come around less. It is a threat, and I always think it's hard to balance that because you
It
do need
is.
to really say that boundary or set the expectation of like, hey, listen, I don't it makes me upset to hear that, and I don't want to hear that.
Yeah. You're bringing up a good point. Like, where's the distinction when I set a boundary, when it becomes a threat or when it becomes a blackmail, let's say?
Blackmail, yeah. That's the if in the scenario you had kids, I would have said the word blackmail. Are you
Mm.
blackmailing me like that? I can't even see my own grandkids.
Mm-hmm. And that could be so usually, and I would be curious, I'm curious about your perspective too. So for me, the distinction is that boundary meant to protect me, to protect my family, to protect my well-being? If the answer is yes, then I would say no. This is uh, might not be a blackmail, not a threat. The other party might perceive it that way, and they might say you are blackmailing me, you are threatening me, because that's their way to push against that boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And they maybe know that if that person really is caring about being caring person, they don't want to threaten anybody, they don't want to blackmail anyone. So maybe in the
Mm-hmm.
past, whenever they used that technique, it worked and the person stopped setting boundaries.
Yeah, yeah.
So that could be one scenario when yes, the other person will tell you, you blackmail them, you give them ultimatum, and actually that's just their way of, you know what, I don't like your boundary. And what does it say about them? Do they really care about how you feel, or they just care about what you do for them? And if you set
Right,
the
right.
boundary, they don't like it, and that's why they say you are giving me ultimatum.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
A
I think that's
blackmail.
a great point. You're right. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a great distinction, and I think that's worth considering. Yeah, because I think some relationships are like that. They're getting more and more. Some relationships can get more and more toxic in that kind of interaction where I'm just kind of weaponizing this term so that you
Yes,
don't set a boundary.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah, so that's a good observation. Um, so I'll agree with that. I think that's fair, and I guess my approach would be
Mm-hmm.
just I would say, you know what, my bad. You're right. That sounded like a threat, and that's not my goal. So like, how are we gonna do this then? Because I don't like hearing that stuff. I don't want to hear that stuff, and I still want to
Yeah.
make sure we see each other. What are we gonna do
Yeah.
about this then?
That's a great
I would put
way.
it back in
Yeah.
the other person's court and say, well, then you're right. I'm not going to
I love
argue with
it.
that. That it's blackmail or threatening. Like, because it sounds like that. You're probably right. I didn't mean to do that. What do you think we should do then? Because I don't like this.
That's a great point. And I realize maybe your observation was very valid. I think my tendency, because I've had to set those very solid boundaries with some family members, people, in my life when I
Yeah.
said, no, I need to take care of me now, and we need to take a break from communication. Unless
Yeah.
something really changes, I don't want to have that conversation.
Yeah.
And so that has been some difficult choices that I had to make to really protect my own well-being and my space.
Right.
And so it seems like my default went there.
Mm.
I am gonna, this is, unless some things are gonna change, this is, I need to protect my own well being.
Yeah.
Unless I'm
Yeah. So
really
you,
being hurt
yeah.
and
So
my
you double
boundaries
down.
respected. Yes.
You double down. You're like, no, actually, I'm going to threaten you even more now. You think that was a threat? I'm going to do even more. You say this again, I'm going to burn down your house.
No.
Um, yeah, that's the other thing I thought that was very interesting is
Hmm.
you throughout the entire conversation you were very, and like at the beginning it was very clear you were trying to think of how do I say this in the most diplomatic way,
Hmm.
and then you continued that theme of I'm just going to talk and guide him and force him through this conversation as we go through.
That's a great observation. I think that's my own family patterns are coming up when I
Mm,
don't feel completely safe in that conversation.
mm,
Uh, I believe that would be my tendency to really, okay, let's focus on the minimum viable. What can I get out of this?
yeah,
Let's agree at least on some one thing that's manageable. Once we agree on that, and then we build up a little bit more trust and a little bit more ease. When we are both relaxed, then maybe we can start talking a little bit, opened up that conversation.
yeah.
But it's very hard to have the difficult conversations already from like a triggered and like not feeling safe, feeling attacked all the time. So then that
I
would be like,
wonder.
mm-hmm,
Well, then I wonder if this conversation over dinner was, if it would have helped you more to even just have the conversation about, I want to change the way we communicate. Not
mm,
even about Mark. We're not going to talk about my
makes
husband.
sense. Yep,
And you just say, hey, listen, I want to communicate better with you. So I want to try these new things. What do you think?
that's
And
a great
setting the
way.
stage in that first conversation of how do we set these ground rules to be safe so that I feel safe in the conversation. But ultimately, how do we have a conversation where we're not yelling at each other or demeaning each other or people around us?
That's a great way of putting it. And it reminds me, always it's easier to share that with my clients and ask them questions rather than, on the spot here. Um, Looking at what is really my challenge, what is the thing that's hurting me.
Mm-hmm.
uh, is that just conversation about that spouse, or is that overall just the dynamics in our conversations that are
Mm-hmm.
happening?
Mm-hmm.
And so really being aware what kind of conversation about what do I want to have, what topic is should come first. Let's say if I paused and reflected, I would have figured, oh, you know what? Actually, anytime I come here, I always am a little bit what's going to happen. Maybe we should have the conversation about that first, rather than picking a specific example of about other things. That one thing that can happen here.
Mm-hmm.
So really, that's part of that preparation. Really thinking, what is that? What are the things that are really bothering you about that communication, that relationship, and finding
Mm-hmm.
what is the first thing that needs to be addressed first. That would make the
Mm-hmm.
difference.
Yeah, love that. So, fun fact also, Lucy, almost everything I said to you was things that my mom has said to me.
Oh,
So I
hmm.
was interested to see how you would respond
Yes.
to those things. I will say though,
Yeah.
she never say anything bad about my wife. She likes my wife.
Aw,
They get
that's
along
very
very
sweet.
well.
Yes.
So it's just about other decisions I made in my
But
life.
sounds like you also had some difficult conversations there. How was it for you with your mom, your experience then?
Um, a lot of yelling. I'll tell you that.
Mm.
There's a lot of yelling, which is why I think but like the yelling led to like progress. And so I think that's what I'm
Oh,
thinking about is like we yelled at each other, but we still made forward progress in how things would go moving forward. And um, yeah, do we have to yell about everything? Probably not. Like some of those conversations probably didn't need to be yelling, but
mm.
um, but we also made forward progress. And we, even in the yelling, we never like yelled about each other,
Oh,
right? It was always like, my mom is this like very rational, logistical, like, hey, I'm always going to be your mom. 20 years from now, 30 years from now,
yeah.
I'm still going to be your mom.
Yeah.
Um, and like, you can't argue with that because they're technically you're
True.
right.
Yeah.
Very true. Yes. um, so yeah, so that would just be a fun tidbit to throw those in to see how you responded.
That was interesting, yeah. And sounds like in your family, more yelling was then the way, in a way, communication, or at least with your mom in that
With least
scenario.
with my
Yeah,
just louder in general. I
louder.
think I
Uh-huh.
think louder, and I think that's why um in my family now with my wife and my kids, like my wife didn't grow up in a family of yelling or
Mm.
any punishment because they were generally good kids.
Mm.
And so when I raise my voice, it sounds like yelling to them.
Oh,
And
so
they're,
they're like, oh my God,
but
something's
I've,
really, really wrong.
yeah, but I've told them before, like, I haven't yelled at, I don't like yelling and like, I
Hmm.
don't like doing it. So I've never shown them like what true yelling looks like or feels like because I like, they
Mm.
even asked me, like, just show it to us. Like, right now, we know it's not real, just show it to us. And I still don't do it because I know it's, if I were to truly yell at the top of my voice, it would be not a pleasant experience for either
Mm.
anybody. So
Yeah,
I try
so you
not
don't want to go there.
I don't want to go there. So
Hmm.
um maybe that's why I
But
got into martial arts.
to
maybe I just have anger
let go
issues.
of that energy, kind
Yeah,
of.
maybe I just have anger issues. But
Ah,
Lucy,
channeling
what are
it.
your takeaways from today? What are you thinking?
So, what am I thinking? That difficult conversations are difficult for a reason because they are. It's not a made up term, but emotionally, they can be very challenging. And at the same time, they are really important to have. And at the end of our conversation, I can imagine, us going for the walks, and I imagine actually our relationship improving and me having more ease when I come visit.
Mm,
So
mm,
there was a hope. So I would say these
yeah,
difficult conversations can provide hope, and they can provide actually getting you what you want,
yeah.
which I assume is better relationships, which is better life, as we say here on our
That's
podcast.
what we say. Yeah.
What
I
would you
would
say
say
is your takeaway?
I think my takeaway is just don't be afraid to set boundaries.
Mm,
I think it's so important for our own well-being. And I guess it's two. One is don't be afraid to set boundaries. And number two, I think it's so important to think about that renegotiating what your dynamic is in your relationship with your family is as you get older. It's always like every life stage you go through, you're a different person. They're a
true.
different person.
Yep.
It's just normal. Everybody's a different person over time.
Mm,
Me now at 40 is different than me at 30, different than me at 20. Me now with two kids is different than 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago when we didn't have any kids.
yeah.
That's just normal. That's just life. And
Will change.
my mom, my dad, they're different people now. They're older. Now they
Mm,
have kids of middle-aged people. Not or now they are parents of middle-aged people. Like it's all
yeah. And
different.
grandparents. Yeah.
Yeah, now they're grandparents. It's a totally different dynamic. And I think it's important to think about how that changes dynamics and relationships over time because it's only normal that relationships will evolve. Expectations should evolve in some sort of way. So renegotiating that
Hmm.
and thinking about it doesn't always have to be a long drawn out conversation for hours
No.
about
Yeah.
things, but it's even just recognizing like, oh yeah, we're different people now. Our relationships
Hmm.
must evolve too, not change completely, but it just evolves and transforms into something new.
Absolutely. And you just gave me one more idea of, sometimes people can feel even grief that that stage of life is gone and in the past. Parents
Mm,
could miss when they had just the small children and they
yeah,
had that connection and that intimacy, and now the child is getting married and they're hardly seeing them because their child is super busy with their own life.
yeah,
And so it's also for the parent to really find their a new kind of the empty nesters in a way that's and being curious rather than judgmental of each other, and seeing each
Yeah.
other with new eyes, even ourselves. Oh, I'm changing. They are probably changing too.
Love that. So if you're listening, if you're listening on any platform, we'd love to hear like who in your life, in your personal life, are you struggling the most to set that to change that relationship with? Who are you needing to think about the dynamics of your relationship that need to change over time? We'd love to hear from you. So if you are on YouTube, if you're on Spotify, just give us a review, give us a thumbs up, give us a like, let us know what you think. Subscribe to us so that we can keep in touch, and let us know if there's any other specific scenarios you want us to go through. Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out so we can role play or even talk about it live on the air with you. So, Lucy, thanks as always. Always a pleasure talking about this stuff. And we'll see you all next time.
See you next time.